Hello everyone, Gary here from timelineastrology.com. This is the October 2023 sidereal forecast. There is a lot happening in October. It's a key month, a pivotal month in the year and for many years. A lot that happen now are going to have a knock-on effect for many years. It's a lot to do with a downturn, whether that is economically or any other which way. I mean, in terms of relations, international relations, diplomacy. Of course, that also means our own personal relationships and our own finances. But I think that the potentials in October are, apart from maybe the more obvious outward challenges, are personally, I think it's a great time in another way. And it basically means that if we use this energy to overcome obstacles and to remove problems and to move through those problems and to air our grievances and to remove things or even people from our life that are in the way and that don't serve us and we don't serve. I think if we use it that way, this could be a very powerful time. If we try and avoid things in October and not deal with it and try and sweep it under the carpet, this could then lead to more problems later on in November, especially. And that's a lot to do with the eclipses. I'll show you the degrees that are being triggered really from the get-go and actually from the end of September, around the full moon on September 29th, when Mars triggers the eclipse. We're really having one trigger after another in October and November. So let's get into the details of this. And first, it's always good to chant to Ganesh to begin anything, but more especially this month, I feel, because Ketu, the south node of the moon, this southern eclipse point, the shadow planet, is creating the solar eclipse on October 14th. So Ketu is really likened to, or it's really linked to, in a way, Ganesh. So Ganesh is almost like Ketu in that it removes things. And of course, Ganesh is seen as the remover of obstacles, but many times Ketu also represents this removing things otherwise. I mean, maybe removing too much and making us feel vulnerable and lost a bit. So that's a very much a Ketu experience. But on a deeper level, this sense of like having to lose ourselves to find our true self, if you will. So it's always good to evoke Ganesh, therefore, around eclipses anyway, because it actually helps us remove the block of Rahu, also the opposite lunar node, which creates more of the block and the obstacle. And then Ketu, the south node, removes that obstacle. Again, it's just that practically we might see many things being removed at this point. Om Gang Ganapataye Namah. It's a very simple, short, rhythmic mantra for Ganesh, or Ganapati is the other name for Ganesh, the remover of obstacles, the Lord of Vedic astrology. So this is a good one to chant this time for the eclipses. A reminder where the eclipses occur. The annular solar eclipse, an almost total solar eclipse, occurs at 26 degrees sidereal Virgo, that's tropical Libra, on October 14th. The lunar mansion here is Chitra. Chitra is all about design and perfection and brilliance, really. One of the symbols is a jewel or a pearl. So it represents this perfection that we're seeking, which is the end of Virgo into the beginning of Libra. It bridges both of these signs. And of course, an eclipse here, with the sun moving into its debilitation, subsequently into Libra, with the south node awaiting it there, the eclipse overshadowing the sun, it literally shows these kinds of themes being played out in a way that could challenge the economy, like I said, is more obvious thing, leadership in many ways, governance, design, looking for that perfect situation, trying to design the perfect life and sort of coming up short, or not feeling very confident or assured in what we're doing, and any kind of aspect of, again, designing our life. And compromise, because what happens subsequently, of course, is that Venus will conjoin the south node at this degree by late November. And so there'll be a lot of issues here around relations, whether it's, again, international relations, diplomacy and war situations and all of that, or again, the economy. So relationships and finances are the key things that are influenced here. Why is Venus debilitated at this degree? Venus doesn't like Virgo because we basically, when designing the perfect life and wanting to get it so and just so, we're not happy until it's just so, and it never is just so. It never is perfect. Everything is imperfect. And so relationships in particular are affected by that because people are imperfect. Relationships are messy. And if we are trying to perfect ourselves or others and relationships, or we're looking for the perfect person that will tick all of our boxes, and when we look at people who don't seem to tick any boxes, we then criticize them and we get hypercritical of other people and ourselves, and we don't appreciate people for who they are and how they are and how they're turning up. We get very miserable, essentially, when Venus is in Virgo for that reason. Now, the other side of that coin is that we can be just happy in searching for perfection, knowing that we cannot ever achieve it. And we just enjoy the process, of bettering ourselves and improving our lives. That's a better expression probably of Venus and Virgo. But usually we don't do that. We end up making the lists and getting quite upset when we can't take anything off the list. And nothing or no one seems to satisfy us. And we're looking for love in all the wrong places. It's not an appreciation. It's not an unconditional sense of love for others. It's everything is conditional in Virgo. So it's I'll be happy if, fill in the blank. So this is a problem with an eclipse now also activating this degree, which is practically Venus's exact degree of debilitation. This is a problem. So there's going to be a lot of power dynamics going on in terms of how it's not perfect, how it isn't working out as we would like. People aren't who we want them to be. Situations are not perfect, essentially. And they're going to be far from perfect in the coming weeks. So we have to just accept all of this, of course. We have to let it go. We have to relinquish. And this is the positive side of Ketu here, the remover of obstacles, allowing us to sort of shed all of this seeking for an illusion, really, and removing this illusion that actually anything is, perfect. It's just an ideal, it's an illusion, essentially. And if we can be very clear about that, everything, if you think about it this way, from another point of view, this notion that 90% of everything is absolute rubbish. If you think about that, 90% of everything is absolute rubbish, and you're okay with that. And actually, only 10% of anything at all, any book, any movie, anything anyone says, anything anyone does, is any good at all. Then, you don't have to live up to that high standards of or trying to reach for this sort of 100% perfection, because it doesn't exist. And not only that, but actually 90% of everything is rubbish. So just let it be rubbish. Let it be as it is. Find balance between Virgo and Pisces. Economies crash, relationships fall apart. Things are not as we would like them always. And to be okay with that and to just say, this is a load of, and be okay with that. I think that's one of the things we have to acknowledge for this eclipse. 2 weeks after the eclipse, there is a partial lunar eclipse to kind of bring everything to a head and resolve some things also, but also bring things to a head. In Aries, 10 degrees of sidereal Aries on October 28th, we're probably going to see an escalation in the war situations around the world. And this is, of course, because of what's been cancelled in a way or challenged in some way on the opposite side of the zodiac in Libra and in Virgo, where there's this sort of negotiation falling apart, really, essentially. And this sort of culmination point in Aries, again, it's good for personally clearing something and taking action to get rid of something and to overcome something. But again, internationally, we'll probably see this as a problem in terms of international relations and diplomacy. So be mindful of that in our own life as well, that maybe it's not the best time to actually take action around the end of October, around the eclipse, and in this eclipse window, as it's called, between October 14th and 28th. Everything feels probably very urgent, and you're probably going to feel like you need to take action and do something, but really I would question whether you really need to. And maybe it's best to postpone taking action at this time and sort of just thinking it through, giving it more time. So the eclipses themselves, like I said, Mars is triggering the solar eclipse from the end of September around the full moon, September 29th. That's already a trigger. Another trigger is when Mars and Ketu conjoin. So this is the eclipse on October 14th. here we have the eclipse itself path running through the Americas, so North and South America. There is actually, interestingly enough, another eclipse running through North America in April next year, 2024, and that will cut through the eastern part of the country, and they'll both intersect around the Texas region. So there's a lot going on in the US right now, and I'll talk more about it in future episodes. But essentially, what we're going to see in the US is major divides, major breaking up really in many ways. I think that's a lot to do with the politics in the US, of course, but that's a whole other. This is the partial lunar eclipse 2 weeks later on October 28th. And again, this is probably a time to maybe just, hold your horses, as it were. And I'm using that word because of Ashwini, which literally means the horsewoman. So horse, because Ashwini is all about bolting and taking action and not thinking about it, just doing it. And when you have an eclipse with a North Node Rahu in Ashwini, a full moon eclipse by Rahu, that could be like taking really impulsive action and reckless action, really just out of, pure impulse and reaction. So probably best to kind of wait on this and not overreact and maybe respond in due course. And even if you do act, I guess, just to not react to that reaction, as it were, so that you don't judge yourself for whatever mistakes you made or whatever you did that you maybe shouldn't have done or said that you shouldn't have said. It's all learning, essentially. So use this time at the end of October, I think, to just be really maybe slow in your actions and more deliberate. These are the lunations, just to be clear, and to show you the charts as well. This is the eclipse on October 14th. Here you see 26 degrees of Virgo. It's very closely conjunct Mercury, and this is probably one of the things that is helping us out a lot, can help us out, in terms of being more rational and level-headed. Mercury is exalted. It is opposite Neptune, but it is exalted and it's very powerful. And so the potential here for making rational decisions is there, absolutely. Again, there's a lot of triggers though, because Mars has already moved over the eclipse degree. It's with Ketu and Libra. And so all of these conjunctions as well in Aries, that's going to lead to this resolution, hopefully, but also this kind of pivotal point by October 28th, which is here for the full moon and partial lunar eclipse. So you have Moon, Rahu, Uranus on one side with Jupiter. You have Mars, Mercury, Sun, and Ketu on the other. So the Sun, interestingly enough, is at its exact degree of debilitation, 10 degrees. So this is where the Sun is at its weakest, and it is eclipsing the Moon in Aries, and actions could be taken here that are not coming from a place of like a surety and confidence, boldly stepping forward and doing something. It again could come from a sense of lack of confidence and overreaction and impulsive actions taken now. So we need to be really mindful of that, I think, around the full moon. So they are the lunations. Let's get into the transits of the planets. Venus is in Leo again in October. It has been here already. It's stationed at 4 degrees of sidereal Leo, moved back into Cancer and moved back over now into Leo by the beginning of the month. That itself is a trigger for economic issues. And there could be some volatility going on here in the economy and in the markets. Venus overall, though, is more restrained in Leo because it's opposite Saturn. So this could be another saving the day sort of situation with Saturn in Aquarius, bringing in the fear element. And so the fear element could be good in one way, and in another way, it could also make it worse. It really depends. So in other words, if you fear the consequences of doing something really reckless, you probably will hold back on that and maybe don't do it. However, if you fear something, and let's face it, let's talk about the economy. When there's a lot of fear in the economy and people then panic and they pull out their stocks and all of that, that's when crashes happen. So that's a bit of a worry, as I've been mentioning for some time now, that I believe there will be a major readjustment in the markets. And I think it's all getting triggered in October and leading to November. So that's Venus and Leo. The other, I guess, side of Venus and Leo, the positive side of it is that, and especially opposite Saturn, is that we can just, hold back, restrain ourselves, enjoy what there is to enjoy, be proud, appreciate, and especially at this point, because before we move into Venus and Virgo by November, where there really will be a downturn, to appreciate that downturn in a way is like appreciating the fall season, where It's actually more poignant in a way when we know that the light is dwindling, when we see everything in nature sort of having reached a culmination point and a balancing point for the equinox. And then as everything sort of darkens gradually, there's a more poignancy around that because we appreciate the beauty in nature more, knowing that it's not going to last, that we're heading into the darker period. Now, if you just draw that conclusion back into your own life or that analogy into your own experience, what does that mean? Relationships, anything that you enjoy, whatever it is in life, finances. The fact is that they're finite. It makes it more poignant and you can enjoy them all the more. People aren't going to be around forever. You're not always going to have money to spend. You're not always going to have X, Y, or Z, whatever it is. It just makes it more meaningful, So restraint might be required, of course, that maybe you don't want to overindulge. It's like, oh yeah, I just want to do whatever and spend, spend, spend. If you know there's a downturn coming by November, but still, it's like enjoying whatever you do have, what little you have, or how much you have, is important at this time. And to really shine, that's the thing about Venus and Leo. Leo is about shining bright, and this is an important dwindling of the light in many ways, of many even resources in many ways, but also of appreciation of what we have right now. Not focusing on the future, not regretting what has happened in the past, but just shining bright in the present. That's Venus and Leo. Pluto is stationing direct on October 11th. That's the next major shift. And this isn't obvious at all because, of course, the outer planets, the non-visible planets are not, obvious. But Pluto is such a slow-moving planet that it might not be obvious to you the changes that are happening underfoot, but there are changes happening, and it might become more obvious as then Mars comes into a square at this time. So Mars in Libra now is squaring Pluto in Capricorn, and so this is another trigger, and not an obvious one necessarily, but it could also push something out into our awareness. Pluto is in Capricorn, sidereal Capricorn. It's dismantling the current system. And the new world order is slowly emerging out of the ruins of an old system that no longer works. But Pluto has just got started in Capricorn, sidereal Capricorn. It's going to be there for, nearly another 2 decades. So there's a slow process of dismantling. And every year that Pluto retrogrades, and it does it every year, there's this sort of demolition job that is kind of going in and clearing out again and again moving back and forth over and over again as we try and sort of reestablish something in a system that is continuing to crumble. It's the current world system that has taken many years to build up cannot be dismantled overnight. It's going to take 20 years. That's how long Pluto is in Capricorn. And every year it retrogrades, we have to reassess how we're getting on with this sort of dismantling process, whether it's putting electric cars on the road or whatever new kind of, energy systems or whatever monetary systems that have to be put in place. It's a slow process. We're not going to get rid of cash overnight. So fill in the blank for yourself, of course, because that means whatever Pluto is doing in your chart, that part of your chart of your life is going through this slow sort of dismantling process every year. Now that it stations direct and it's a square to Mars, it might become more obvious in October what you have to let go of, what you have to change, what you have to push through. And, again, it's like this wrecking ball in a way coming in. Okay, I have to get rid of that. I have to get rid of that. So Mars, like I said, is in Libra in a square, and it moves in on October 3rd. And as soon as it does, it will conjoin the south node Ketu and square Pluto. If this is not a trigger for major escalation in war situations around the world, I don't know what is. Mars in Libra is just like I would say a bull in a china shop, but it's really more like a wedge driven between two people. And in the case of world affairs, like a wedge driven between two nations. And it doesn't like it in Libra because it's having to negotiate. It doesn't want to negotiate. And at the same time, it's aspecting Pluto in Capricorn. And that's a lot to do with governance and systems governments put in. And Mars here, because of war situations, again, this is going to be opposite Aries, of course, where all of the planets are piled in Aries, including Uranus. That's another trigger later on in October. Opposite Rahu, all of these things are triggers for major escalation in the war. So for you personally, I would just say be mindful in October, November of things spiraling out of control. If you have that kind of blowout with somebody and you don't want to burn your bridges, then be mindful. Try and think about the long-term implications here. Try and think about how it's affecting your relationship, if it's a relationship that's to stay with you. Also think about your finances and things like that. I think about the long-term implications. Mercury is a faster moving planet, is moving into Virgo in the first couple of weeks or so of October. That's actually, again, like I said, a more level-headed, probably a better situation where cool heads could win out. So that's good. But then it gets involved in the eclipse in Libra, transiting the eclipse degree at the end of Virgo and moving into Libra, conjoined the South Node, opposite the North Node, opposite Uranus, in a square to Pluto, all of these things. I think this is again a trigger, by the end of the month. And we're in the middle of the eclipses then, once it moves into Libra from October 14th until 28th. So it really is a trigger. And when Mercury is involved in the eclipses, like really practical stuff gets triggered, like travel, business, very down to earth practical stuff is affected by all of that. And we can't keep a cool head when those things are affected. If everything is running smoothly and we communicate very effectively and we can get from A to B easily and we can do business and we can make money, we're fine. We can put up with that relationship that's a bit whatever. But when those things fall apart, those like everyday things fall apart, then there's a problem. So Mercury's adding problems here. And yeah, negotiations could completely break down at this point by the end of the month. So that's something to be mindful of. The sun is in a way the background in all of this. And this has been a signature in the past of downturns, even though it goes into Libra every year at this time. It's the fact that it's combined with the eclipse, the South Node eclipse, especially, that has been a trigger for collapses in the markets in the past, for example. So this is really the end of October into November is when really we're going to see the downturn in a big way. Now, hopefully it won't be a massive downturn and that, again, cool heads win out and that Saturn's restraint helps with, making decisions that have a better implication long term. But it's likely that there'll be a lot of things happening here that just seem, like poor choices. And that's because when the sun is in Libra, when it's affected by the eclipses and Mars and all of these things, by the way, Mars is combust, therefore, it's like we react strongly to not feeling great about ourselves, and leaders do the same. And then, as you can see with the spat between Canada and India, it's just these leaders are human beings and they have reactions like all of us. But they're making decisions based on nations. So when you add all of that into the mix, you're going to likely see poor choices being made and poor negotiations, and it all kind of spiraling quite quickly, I can imagine. And the same could be said for the economy. It's people actually making decisions about what's happening to billions of people, so let's hope, again, cool heads win out. Let me put it that way. So in the background of all of this, of course, the nodes are shifting. And depending on what calculation you use, whether it's mean or true, they are either shifting by the end of October or end of November. And either way, in this whole period, October, November, with so many uncertainties going on, this is another uncertainty. In a way, this is the kind of spiraling out of control uncertainty that's happening because Rahu is at the very beginning of Aries, about to move into Pisces. That's especially challenging because, it's at the very beginning of the zodiac, moving back to the end of the zodiac. So everything is kind of being sort of unraveled in a way. Ketu moving into Virgo is another sort of unraveling as well, because Ketu is, just like Rahu is, not conducive to that sign. Rahu is not conducive to Pisces, Ketu not conducive to Virgo. In a way, they're in each other's domains. Ketu would be more conducive to Pisces and spiritual orientations, where Rahu would be more conducive to Virgo and down to earth, practical stuff and attaining stuff and building stuff and making stuff and all of that. When they're in each other's signs in this way, Ketu and Virgo is going to obviously challenge business and travel and trade and practical stuff. Rahu and Pisces is going to confuse the hell out of us for the next couple of years because it's also conjoined Neptune. and they haven't been here together since 1857. And, that has, historically meant uprisings. The Indian uprising took place in 1857. For example, there were a lot of issues on the sea. A lot of ships were lost in 1857. In a modern context, we could see just a lot of souls being lost, and you can take what you will from that. I think generally there's just going to be an air of confusion around for the next year and a half with the nodes in these signs, and not very practical, rational decisions being made, and losses being felt in very real ways, and people gravitating towards things that, that feel they could anchor them, I suppose, in a more spiritual way, but then also are lost because people mislead them. So a lot of complexity going on here with the nodes in these signs. I've written an article about it, which you can read. It's currently only available for patrons. So think about signing up for $5. You can get the article, and that's how I'll leave it. I think is enough to say there. A lot more to say in the weeks to follow as well. So if you like the video, please press the like button and subscribe if you want to get more content like this. I'm going to post the sign by sign forecast very soon. If you have any thoughts, any questions, please feel free to post below. And again, think about signing up for the Patreon page. That's patreon.com/timeline astrology. You can actually get a 7-day free trial now. Give it a go. I have a Scorpio video club and an audio club now as well. So I'm going to be releasing more private audio content for patrons, where, I just share things that I wouldn't be comfortable sharing on a public platform, perhaps, maybe more controversial topics or case studies, charts of people in the news. So patreon.com/timeline astrology. Okay, everyone, I hope that has been interesting. Hope it's been helpful. And I wish you all the best for the upcoming month. Hope you can use these transits for what they're best for, which is basically overcoming something, getting rid of something, moving through something, not denying something or ignoring it, not neglecting it, but dealing with it, bringing it up into our awareness, and moving through it and beyond. So hope that's been of help. As always, wish you the very best for the month ahead, and until next time.